Okay, so when women come out later in life, their husbands generally have three reactions. Um, well, they have a lot of reactions, but when they start discussing about what they're going to do, it turns to this. The husband thinks they're going to have a threesome because, lesbians are sexualized. My ex and I, we had this conversation within 10 minutes. And some couples, it takes months and months and months, but we did this in 10, 15 minutes. They talk about a threesome, and I said to my ex, um, Jim, if if I sleep with a woman, you're not going to be there. That was not my interest. Second, people really try to open up their marriages. And they try to do it, to like, so let the wife or the husband date. That is really problematic because opening your marriage will not save your marriage. And also, two, expectations and clear boundaries around formerly monogamous couples is really, really hard to establish. So if you've been married to 20 years to your wife or your husband, and you've been monogamous, trying to open up your marriage is really hard. And then among the 30 year old set, maybe 40-year-old set, they think about practicing polyamory, which is different than open marriage, because polyamory is that, you may both date the woman, and I've had polyamorous experts on my podcast, Coming Out and Beyond, and they also say don't go to polyamory if one of you is coming out, because inevitably it will not save your marriage.
Anne-Marie Zanzal, welcome to the Inner Entrepreneur podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm privileged to have you on the show. Um, I've been thinking about this, and it seems that later in your life, I can probably say that because obviously I'm older than you. So, no,
Exact same age.
are we? Okay, cool. Okay.
How old are you?
Yep.
61?
I'm 60.
Oh, I'm older than you, Paul.
Okay, so I'm talking to a mature woman then. It's
I am older than you. I've got a
that's the thing. Um, yeah, I mean, later in your life, you made what I would think is a very profound transition. Uh, I imagine it took enormous courage. Um, can you start off the conversation by sharing what that transition was? Maybe what it was, maybe what it cost you, and what your life looks like on the other side.
Well, do we have 4 hours?
Yeah, sure. Let's go. This is the Joe Rogan podcast.
So this is the thing, is that, um, what Paul is alluding to is that I came out later in life at 52 years old after being married to a man for 27 years, and I am the mom of 4 children. And I like to tell this story this way, and as I have, like, gone further and further into my LGBTQ, lesbian, queer life, and you'll hear me exchange those words frequently, the story has changed because, I used to tell it in such detail, like we would be here for 4 hours. Now I'll tell it like this. So I was somebody that was sort of aware that I might not be straight. When people who come out later in life come in 3 different buckets. They are often people that fall in love with somebody, never expected it. They are somebody, that had dated women in college or high school, but because of family pressure, married somebody and a man. And then there's people like me who came out without, really ever dating somebody of the same sex, ever been with the same sex, but, um, I was somebody that was always aware of it, would take it down out of my shelf and put it away. This is all subconscious, and this is all in 2020 hindsight, because I've done a lot of reflection around this. So the first time I noticed my attraction to a woman was like 18, 19 years old. I was in a bar with a boyfriend at the time, and she was pretty, and we were interested. Nothing happened, but I woke up the next morning consciously wondering, am I gay? Like, what happened with all that last night? And I chalked it up to every every straight girl is 3 drinks away from a lesbian encounter. So I was like, okay, that was that. So then a couple years later, I was engaged to my now ex-husband, and I was out with a good friend of mine who was getting their doctorate from Stanford, and her husband, future husband, were really involved in the queer scene at Stanford. And I was like, this is so interesting and so fascinating. And I just plumbed her mind for like a couple of hours as we were at lunch. And I walked away. And that was really the first time I consciously wondered, am I gay? It was 1986. The AIDS, well, it was a little later than that, 88. The AIDS epidemic was all over. We're the same age, the late 80s, mid 80s, late 80s. Like, people don't realize, like, how prevalent AIDS was. And so there was a lot of homophobia in the zeitgeist. It wasn't directed towards lesbians, but, I heard it. And so, I remember going, do I how do I do this? Like, how do I meet people? There was a gay bar in the next town. Nobody would go with me. My friend group would go with me. So I just put it away. And like most people, I got married and I started raising children in my 30s, and I don't really remember them. And then in
The
my
children are the 30s.
my 30s, you know that. If you have kids, anybody
I
listening who has
I
kids,
have 3 kids.
yeah, I have 4. I just don't really remember the 90s very well. And so I started to, like a lot of people, I find that midlife is between 35 and 55. That is the time of life where we as adult development are supposed to say, okay, I have been given this script to live. Does this script fit me? And that is when we start questioning. So I read an article in Oprah Winfrey magazine, and in the magazine, they were talking about the fluidity of women's sexuality. And I was about 42 at the time. And I was never so happy in my life, Paul, because I read this article and it meant that even though I had started down the straight path, I didn't have to stay on it forever. My then 16-year-old daughter, who's now 34 and the mother of my only grandson, um, I said to her, "Hey, honey," I said, if dad and I never, if something ever happens to dad and I, don't be surprised if I end up with a woman." She has absolutely no memory of that conversation, but it was like the most significant thing for me. And so I, like a lot of people, it came to the surface. And then because cognitive dissonance plays such a role in people coming out, I just forgot about it. Like, I started to dismiss it again in my brain and be like, this isn't real. This isn't, I've got to put it away. I'm the mother of 4 kids. I have a 3-year-old, I can't do this." So I put it away. And then so this is really where it gets interesting. This is when I went back to divinity school. So I went to divinity school when I was 42 years old. I went to Yale, and I was in Connecticut, and honestly, I went to Yale because it was a divinity school and I can get to it quickly enough. So I went to Yale Divinity School, and I was a really great ally, Paul. So they were having a national coming out National Coming Out Day celebration, which is October 11th, and I went. And I was at Marquand Chapel, which is a beautiful chapel at Yale Divinity School. And all of a sudden, I had this incredible existential crisis. Like, holy shit, I'm gay. And I started crying and crying and crying. And I had to like leave because my internalized homophobia was so bad. It was like, oh my God, if people see me crying, they're going to think I'm gay. And so I did leave. And I like to define internalized homophobia is that a lot of people who come out later in life are amazing allies to the community, but the only person that can't be gay is themselves. And that's how I define my internalized homophobia. And so over the next 10 years, I struggled really hard to come out. I told my husband in 2010, he was pretty aware of it because I didn't want to be gay. When I told him, I said, it was really hard to tell your husband you think you're gay. And so,
I can imagine.
so I said to him, and he goes, "No, you're not." And I said, "Oh, okay." Because I just, and then I went to therapists. I talked to so many people about it over the ensuing 8 years. um, because I kept trying to get a professional to tell me that I was not straight. And now I realize the only person that could do that is me. So, in 2016, I was working as a hospice chaplain. And I'd been working as a hospice chaplain about 6, 7 years. And I had a client sign on, a patient sign on to hospice. And she was like 94 years old. And she's like, I'm going to sign on to hospice and die the next day. And if anybody has had anybody in hospice, you know that often doesn't happen, and people
Mm.
often live a long time in hospice. So about 8 months into her living and me visiting her as the chaplain, she said to me, "I feel like I have been waiting for something my entire life." And you know when somebody says something to you offhandedly, it hit me like square in the chest. And I was like almost shaking when she said that. Yeah, she wasn't gay. That wasn't, it was just what she said. Um, and, I always had this theory in hospice when people were so wondering why people were staying alive so long, like, "Why is mom still hanging out?" And she should have been gone months ago. I always had a theory that we are so interweaved as humans that I would say to families, "Well, sometimes it's not about you. It might be one of the nurses, and it might be one of the people that are around her that needs to learn something from her before she goes." And, unfortunately, she died a really horrible death, which 99.9% of people on hospice die a peaceful death. And so I ended up holding her while she was dying because we had a really inexperienced nurse there. And, I was like, "You can go, you can go, you can go." So, it was pretty traumatizing.
Yeah.
And I was ordained a couple of weeks later. And when I was ordained, my minister friend said to me, Something's gonna happen to you that you don't expect." And so, about 3 weeks after I was ordained, I came out for the 3rd and final time to my therapist. And what happened with that patient was I was so traumatized, we started talking to my therapist about it, and I told her that story. And, like, being a consummate therapist that she was, she asked me, "So, what have you been waiting for your whole life, Anne-Marie?" And that's when I said, for the 3rd time, um, "I think I'm gay." And I started crying, and I said, "This is going to open up a Pandora's box." And she said, "No, it's not." And I'm really glad she lied to me that night because it absolutely did. So that is like the story of my coming out. And then all the aftermath after.
I think that's such a beautiful question. What have I been waiting for my whole life? And
Mhm.
you can ask yourself that question anytime. You can wait till you're 94 and have weeks to live if you want, or you can ask at any time. And as I think of as I was thinking of this conversation and journey you've been on, it struck me that as it happens, not to diminish coming out as a lesbian, but as it happens, that was what you had to discover about yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
Everyone listening to this podcast, everyone listen. It may be I need to come out and admit that I fucking hate my job or my business or the country I live in, or I want to end my marriage. It doesn't matter what it is. There's a list of things, and one of those is which is also a huge challenge. I need to come out as being gay, but to me, that's the label. The emotional experience you go through to get there, and how hard it is for some people. I think it's the same journey. That's my thinking.
Bingo. 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 I'm so glad you said that. Oh my goodness. I'm so glad we're talking. I truly believe that. My queerness is what I needed to acknowledge about myself to be able to live the most wholehearted, holistic life I could. Mm. But that's not it for other people.
Yeah.
The thing is, on the bottom of my emails, my bottom quote is from Mary Oliver, who's a very famous poet. And it says, "Tell me, what are you going to do with your one wild and precious life?" And so for me, Like, I acknowledged my religiousness. I acknowledged all kinds of things, but acknowledging my queerness and acknowledging my sexuality changed my life in so many different ways. And you are exactly right. The question is, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question you just asked?
No. Sure. Are you crazy? How can I remember the question? No, but it's right.
The question is that you said, I do not want to minimize you coming out, but this
Yes,
is
exactly. But I think it's the same. Yes,
it is the same.
that is my point. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think your trauma was you coming out, but I think that trauma is the same for everyone else. And for people who've listened to this podcast and know me, I have told the story of sitting in my office, thinking I was going to have a heart attack, and wondering if the ambulance would get, because it was the hospital was 7 minutes away, and literally thinking, will the ambulance get to me before I hit the ground, before I die? What will happen to my, this is 20 years ago, what will happen to my beautiful wife and my 3 beautiful kids at home? Who will care for them? All these things were coming out. But what I realized after is that came because I was living a version of myself that wasn't true. It was my business. I still have the business. um, but it was a version of what I was doing in that business and how I was running it that looked very successful on the outside. So honestly, I looked good. Nice house, nice car. I mean, it all looked great. And I would have told you, by the way, had you asked, it was all great. But the truth of it was inside, I was absolutely miserable. Um, and it took me to that moment to begin to go, are you going to kill yourself for it? So what when and my struggle then was to admit, well, I've presented myself to the world as this guy. It's actually not who I want to be. I want to be something different. And so um when I hear your story, it's I think your journey was more difficult than mine, but I do think I didn't have to go because you know I had to change how I worked, um, but I didn't have to come home to my wife and go, our relationship is ending. I didn't have to sit down with my sons and tell them our family was ending. So, and to me, I mean, I have 2 businesses, and business is precious to me, but my family are everything to me. So I'm um how how did your husband respond to it when when he finally had to go, okay,
This
because
is
I'm losing my wife here, you know?
um, so it was a process, right? So I now, I'm on this show because I've created a business that works
Mm,
with people coming out later in life. And I did it because my own coming out was so painful and so hard with no resources that I wanted to make it easier for other people because I am a minister at heart.
mm.
Um, so I am going to, my story is within this, but I'm going to generalize it to the people I serve. Typically, when women tell their husbands that they're not straight, okay, let me back up a little bit. Women come out later in life very differently than men come out later in life. So if men are often on the down low for the long time, meaning that they've had like sexual relationships with other men and they're still married to their wives. It's just a different it's just a different way of looking at things and how men and women perceive sex. Okay.
Yeah, I get there's a different perception. So does that mean men more aware of their sexuality?
I think so, much more. There are men that deny it. A lot of the
Or yeah,
a lot of the church guys don't do that, but
yeah.
they've denied it for a long time. Like people that are in like fundamentalist religions and also very
Yeah.
conservative religion. Yeah, they don't do that.
I
It's
mean, for someone who's heterosexual, I mean, I mean, again, and I think for people listening to this, I think that um, coming out as gay in 2026, I can only speak for what it's like in Ireland and Europe. I don't know about the US. Um, is a whole different world to coming out as gay when we were both in our teens. I mean, I
oh
mean,
yeah.
I think it was illegal in Ireland. I get it was illegal in Ireland back then. So the shame, it, to, I don't know. So thankfully, I didn't have that challenge because I wasn't gay. But I can understand how if I had been as a man, I might have said, well, I'm still going to get married because
Right.
I can't admit to the world, because it would have been horrible. It would have been a horrible experience in Ireland.
Well, let me get back to that. Well, my wife came out in the 1980s. So
Okay.
I met somebody who'd been out for a really long time after my husband and I, when we were in the divorcing process. I'm not somebody that started a relationship while I was married to my husband, and a lot of people do. And I don't cast any judgment on that, but I wasn't. And I met my now wife soon after I came out, and she always jokes. She said, "Oh my God, you were like, you had these 4 beautiful children on your thing. You were, you went to Yale, you were a minister." She goes, "I was gonna get you." But she got else. Yeah.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
But in 1985, when my wife came out, she slept with her prayer partner from the Baptist Student Union, and that's how she realized she wasn't as straight as she thought she was. It was illegal here in Tennessee,
Mm.
and it was so on the down low, so not talked about. If you went out with your girlfriend, with another girlfriend, a couple, 2 women, you were together for 2 or 3 hours before you would ask them, "Are you a gay couple?" Because you wanted to protect each other. So, one thing that people do miss, like my friends, I have several friends that are in their 60s that came out in the 80s. And there was a sense of community in the queer community that doesn't exist anymore. And they talk about missing that, because you were sort of like, you're countercultural. So you went to house parties. It was really hard to find people to date and stuff like that. My wife talks about the one mimeograph sheet that went out to that the Unitarian Church would hold a lesbian dance once a month. And if you'd missed that dance,
That was it.
the missing Sony. Well, getting back to your question about my husband. Okay, so when women come out later in life, their husbands generally have 3 reactions. Um, well, they have a lot of reactions, but when they start discussing about what they're going to do, it turns to this. The husband thinks they're going to have a threesome, because, lesbians are sexualized. My ex and I, we had this conversation within 10 minutes. And some couples, it takes months and months and months, but we did this in 10, 15 minutes. They talk about a threesome, and I said to my ex, um, "Jim, if I sleep with a woman, you're not going to be there." That was not my interest. Second, people really try to open up their marriages. And they try to do it, to like, so let the wife or the husband date. That is really problematic, because opening your marriage will not save your marriage. And also, two, expectations and clear boundaries around formerly monogamous couples is really, really hard to establish. So if you've been married to 20 years to your wife or your husband, and you've been monogamous, trying to open up your marriage is really hard. And then among the 30-year-old set, maybe 40-year-old set, they think about practicing polyamory, which is different than open marriage, because polyamory is that, you may both date the woman, and I've had polyamorous experts on my podcast, Coming Out and Beyond, and they also say, don't go to polyamory if one of you is coming out, because inevitably it will not save your marriage. So my ex he was pretty accepting of my queerness once, we got to that point. Okay, when I told him for the last time, I kid you not. By the way, you were talking about something before. I had checked all the boxes to make a successful woman. I married a man who was a very good provider. I lived on 50 acres in Connecticut, beautiful provider, has his own company. I was the mother of 4 children. I was the pastor of 2 different churches in my tiny, small little town. Like, in the check the box of success list, I had achieved it as a woman. And I had this internal restlessness and this internal, like, there's something wrong. So when I told him for the 3rd time, he said, "Oh, thank God." And I don't know what that was about. I think that it was about, um, the problems of our marriage now firmly went on my queer shoulders. And this is the thing, just like women are acculturated to be good women. Our guys are acculturated to be good men.
Yeah.
And good men don't get divorced. And and so and good men don't cause problems in their marriage. So my husband, my now ex-husband, wanted to be perceived as a good guy. And he is a good guy. He's not a bad person or anything like that. He's a wonderful father.
Was
Wonderful.
he angry?
He was angry that we got divorced and the financial piece. That's where the anger came in.
I'm just thinking, I'm married for 36 years, and I'm just thinking, because you know, these conversations with once or twice with my wife over the years, you know, when you talk about someone being gay or something, and the thing has always been, I would feel like you lied to me for 36 years. It's and
No.
that would be a kind of a sense like
But that's
the lie would, yeah, okay.
yeah, that's an absolute no because I didn't know.
Yeah, you were on a journey and
Well, that's the thing is that's why I talk about women being a little bit different, is that 50% of my clients, Paul, don't know and never thought that they were gay. I was like somebody who had, but never thought they were gay until they met another woman and fell in love. Like that never occurred to them. I was raised as a Roman Catholic by an Irish mother who was a believer in the Baltimore Catechism, who was a generation older than most of my peers because she was a baby boomer. Um, and Catholicism was such a strong force in my life because I went to Catholic schools, Catholic church, and and it was my because I came from an alcoholic home. My dad was an alcoholic when I was a child. He stopped drinking when I was 18. Thanks, Dad. Um, he, but he was a wonderful grandpa and everything. And he was really good. He did a lot of amends over the years. But um, you know, school and church was a place of safety for me. Like
mm,
I knew what was going to happen in church and school when I went in, and I was a girl who was smart. So those, if you went to Catholic school, those girls were like, they crowned Mary at the maypole and stuff like that. And so I was so acculturated to be straight. Like it was in my blood. And I'm also the youngest of 5, and I am also 9 years after my next sibling, good Catholic family. And and my sisters got married at 20. And so I was like, it just didn't even occur to me that I could live a gay life. It just didn't. And that has flummoxed me for years. And I've worked with so many people where that's never occurred to them that they could live a life other than a compulsory heterosexual life, which means everybody's assumed to be straight and everybody's going to get married and have babies. And it just didn't occur to me. So I didn't lie because I didn't even know it myself until I admitted it to myself in 2016. Like,
I think I think unless you've had that experience, maybe you don't really understand it because when you're speaking for myself, so when you're heterosexual, whatever age it was, I started noticing women were attractive. I don't know, 12 or 13 or whatever. Um, and maybe as you say, it's a stronger thing. Physical attraction is a stronger thing for men. So, um, I was obviously attracted to at that age to young teenage girls or whatever. Um, and I've never in my life been attracted to men. So I kind of then assume, well, if you're gay, it would just be the same at 12 or 13. You'd go, oh, I fancy women or whatever. So I kind of just made that assumption. And I can see it's not quite like, or maybe it is more like that for men. Maybe that is the thing.
oh, well, and for some women, they know, like, what the
Yeah.
biggest surprise to me of coming out later in life, I would say 50 to 60% of all lesbians come out somewhere in their teens and 20s. And then there's about 40% that don't come out until after. So let me explain this to you. So when I was 14 years old, I had my very first playful sexual experience with a girl. And then I also kissed a boy that summer. It was a sweet little innocent kiss. You know, it was my neighbor's cousin from Florida. And I kissed him. My memories, because of my acculturation, because of my conditioning, the memory of kissing that boy was filed away as a sweet little coming of age 14-year-old girl story.
Mm.
The memory of that sexual experience with the other girl was filed away as shame. I
Mm.
did something wrong. I shouldn't have done that. You know, she was like a year younger than me. Did I bully her? You know, all kinds of questions like that. And so that is my conditioning. That is my conditioning by my faith, because Catholicism in the United States, or my part of the United States, queerness was just not mentioned. Like, queer people didn't exist. They never talked about lesbians or gay people. So it just didn't exist. My mom, who served in San Francisco when she was in the waves, said that was the first time she ever realized that there were gay men, and she was like 22 years old, you know? Um, so I think that's one of those things. And also, as a woman, I have been conditioned to believe that relationships with men are hard, that I am responsible for caretaking men's feelings and emotions. So, and so when relationships with men are hard when we're teenagers in our 20s, it's in the zeitgeist, right? So we just like, there isn't even thoughts about, oh, am I gay? You know, we're just been told that they're going to be hard, so they're hard, and we just try to deal with them, whatever way we can. And then older, um, as we get older, some of the same things happen, but our brains just keep, like, I'm telling you, it is brain work. The cognitive dissonance, you get these signs that you may not be as straight as you think you are. And that's where I start with my clients. I may not be as straight as I think I am. You're doing the brain work, but you keep getting signs that you may not be straight, but you keep denying them because you have established this life that is very straight. And it's very much the same as how you said when you said, let's not minimize, I'm not minimizing this, but that's the same for people who know something that's tangible about themselves, but they keep denying it and keep minimizing it, because to accept that about themselves, they are going to have to face some pain and change.
There are so many tales of people who become doctors, or they become lawyers, or they go into a family business, or they do whatever because it's the expectations.
I know.
And I think a lot of those people never come out. I mean, a lot of them live their entire life and probably get to the end of their lives realizing I had one shot at this.
Well, and that's what changed me, because working in hospice for 7 years was the greatest gift of all, because what I realized is people do not regret the things they've done. If they've done something and they've made a mistake, they've often made meeting. My patients regretted the things they didn't do. So when I started this journey, it was like with my ex, I was like, I just want the experience of sleeping with a woman. I just want to see what that's like, because I just started at the base, right? And then, like, listening to my hospice patients having such regret of not divorcing their husband or their wife, not leaving a marriage that really sucked, you know? Of, not going for that job, not changing their career. And this is the thing, I'm going to have no regret at the end of my life, because I've done a lot of stuff, and I'm just brave that way. And so, like, if you are somebody listening to this and you're like, oh my God, she's talking about me, I am. Do what you want to do, because we only get one wild and precious life.
I think I'm gonna call it that there's very few people that can listen to it and not say to some degree, she's talking about me.
Mhm.
Because I think so many people live a half life, that they live a life that they and as I'm thinking this out, I'm kinda going, what you say makes sense because my experience is mostly with business owners and entrepreneurs who've built very successful businesses, and they thought money success was the solution. And it's a solution, and it's wonderful that I'm not knocking it, but they find there's still something missing. And the missing thing is they've never asked, "Who am I? What do I want? How do I want to live my
Mhm.
life?" Um, but the conditioning is that most of them never actually a penny never dropped that they could ask that question. So it's the same thing. They go conditioned from
I would say
your
that's great. I have an
and
ex-husband that went into a family business, so I completely understand. He owns his own company now, but we're watching him how miserable he was in the family business, and because his dad owned it, and then he took it over, and he actually made it more successful than his dad, and his dad profited off his labor.
Mm.
And watching my ex do that, and, my ex, when he was in college, he was a Grateful Dead head. He followed the Dead, and he was a DJ. He should have never came back to Connecticut. I think he would have had a much happier life if he didn't work with his dad, and even my children see how he tries to please his father. His father's still alive, he's 90,
uh,
and my children feel sad for him because he's still looking for that parental approval that he's never gonna get because his dad's pretty self-centered. So he's just never gonna get that. And I do think a lot of like, if you especially if you go into a family business, man, you earn every penny of that, you know? And right now, it's really funny because I have 2 sons now. My daughters want nothing to do with it. I have 2 sons now, and one son is in business with my ex-husband now. He owns a timber frame barn company, and he's in business with him, and the other son's like, "Nope." Like, "Good for you."
I the problem is not what you do. The problem is not going to a family business or becoming a lawyer. The problem is never those things. The problem is understanding what your nature is and what and maybe you should be an artist or be a hippie. Maybe that's what you should be. Or maybe you should be a businessman, or maybe you should come out as gay or do whatever. But the challenge I see I see it for so many people. And maybe I'm being judgmental in saying that, but I sit around tables with people and I just feel that so many people are living in some degree of unconscious fear.
Mhm.
Um, because I don't know, were we ever told to take that moment and look inside and see who we really are? One of the early questions I ask you, and I don't know if you answered it, is when you look, I'm looking at 'em, I'm seeing a positive to in the po to your late coming out, and the positive is that you have 4 children, and I'm sure that I'm sure
Oh,
that
it's really hard with them too, yeah.
yeah, really hard with them, but you have 4 children and you have a grandchild, and maybe if you'd never gotten into a straight relationship, you mightn't have that. So you might have missed that, and that was my so I that maybe is a positive. The question I asked early on is, what was the cost to you? So
It was a lot.
yeah, because it's been a very to some degree, well, I'm gonna say it's been a positive story. You've told the story very lightly, which I think is a positive thing because then people I think in listening to you, someone listening to this podcast would be encouraged
Right.
by
That's what I wanna do because, as we said, if you need to follow your heart and do what's the best for you. Okay, what's the cost? I lost a 27-year marriage to my best friend. Um, we were not lovers for a long time like a lot of straight married couples, but we were really like, we both loved our children, and that's what united us. Um, I lost my community, um, because,
people alienate you.
they did they just stood back because the straight member of a couple that's divorcing that way will get the support,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's your fault. You're to blame. Yeah, yeah.
And because they understand that more.
Yes, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've broken the rules. He hasn't.
Yeah, I broke the rules. He did not.
Yeah.
Um, I was okay, so I worked for hospice and I was like the public face of the hospice that like I would do like, I would go and do talks and stuff like that. And my boss, who was a Roman Catholic, she was in charge. She no longer used me in that role when I came out. I left pretty soon after. Um, I lost my community that I lived in for a long time. Part of it was of my own shame and guilt, so I distanced myself from them as well. I had not worked through my guilt and shame around actually, my guilt and shame around getting divorced was bigger than my guilt and shame around being gay. Like, when I told people I was gay, that felt like a relief. The divorce
Yeah.
part was a lot harder. A lot harder. Um, and, my relationships with my children changed. So my oldest and my youngest were fine. They adjusted and my youngest, who was 14 at the time, was the one who was most affected, and he was the first to be the most accepting because he had to see me all the time. He had this, he knew my wife, my then girlfriend, now wife. So he was pretty accepting. He's also the most sweetest, most emotionally mature person I pretty much know. My oldest was okay too. My middles really had a hard time. And in fact, my second child, who identified as non-binary for a while, I don't know if they identify that way anymore, was really, really hard. I mean, like we were estranged for a while. Um, so the changes in the relationships with my children were really, really hard. And I also moved. It was so uncomfortable where I was, and my ex really made it miserable around the money situation that I just needed to get out of there. So when my girlfriend, now wife, and I were talking about it, she had a very ill mother who has since died. So the decision was that I moved to Nashville. So we dated about a year and a half before I moved here. And that meant leaving my 16-year-old son with his dad.
Right. So that meant leaving your children.
Well, no, the other ones were all grown.
Oh, they're all grown.
Yeah,
So
they were living all over the United States.
so it's just your 16-year-old and everything. That must have been extraordinarily difficult.
That's my biggest regret.
Yeah.
That's actually the only regret I have. I mean, we saw each other all the time. My ex made it extremely difficult for me to see him. So I was always fighting that because he was angry at me and he was trying to punish me. Um, but ironically, my youngest and I have a really close relationship. And like, I will go to bed and I just see it like, I love you, mom. I see a text from him. Like, I haven't initiated it. He just sends
Mhm.
it to me. Um, so I feel like almost my youngest and I had to deal with all that stuff together, because, when I moved, I didn't have a place to go when I would go back home. I would go back to Connecticut every month for a week and a half. So I would get Airbnbs and stuff like that. And now I think about it, is if my ex had been a little bit more okay, our house had a whole guest suite, like, where I could have gone in and out of the guest suite and had the bathroom and have been able to stay and see my son and be with my son, and I wouldn't have had to uproot him because he would go to the Airbnbs with me and so it was just really chaotic. So, if I had a do-over, I probably would have stayed in Connecticut until he was graduated from high school. It would have been about 2 years. Um, but it would have been really hard to be with the person that I had fallen in love with too, because, it was a lot for her to come back and forth. Her mother was dying, and I don't know if that way relationship would have survived if I had stayed in Connecticut. So that was a real chaotic time, and I'm really glad it's over with. If it was for about 5 years. And now everything's returned to normal. I mean,
Mm.
even my estranged child, is talking on the group like when I have a text chat with my kids, which like every mother, I send them Instagram videos, which they don't reply to.
Yes, yeah.
So, like, my kids and I
Or
are
if they want something, then they go, right?
my kids and I are all fine. They're very used to it. They love my wife. They absolutely love her. and a couple of them are extremely close to her. Like, she has a relationship with them outside of me, which is what I always wanted. And my ex-husband has been partnered with his partner now for about 2 months. He started dating her about 2 months after I started dating my wife, and it was actually his middle school girlfriend. So he is with his middle school girlfriend now, and he's fine. He's happy. I mean, I was, and also too, because I was living a closeted life that I was unaware of. I had a lot of anger. And, he got a lot of that anger. And so once I came out, I lost that anger, but he also didn't have to deal with that anymore because I, if he ever, I was tough on him sometimes. And it's much better that we are not married. And it's much better that he is with his partner who is very straight and and hopefully they have a great life together, an intimate life and all that stuff like that. I don't know that, but you know, I when we got to when he dated his started I'll never forget because I was telling a good friend of mine when I was going through this. She was 89 years old and she was a Jungian analyst. And I was telling her about, oh my God, I don't know who's going to take care of him. I love him, but I just have to go do this. And he needs somebody. I said, I'm sort of his mom too, as I need, and she said to me, Anne-Marie, have you ever thought you might actually be relieved when he finds somebody else? And that shifted my whole perspective because his partner is so much better taking care of him than I am, and she was right. I was really relieved when he found somebody that he could love. I didn't feel as responsible anymore.
What you're describing there is, again, universally true that transition can be challenging. And, and it's why people don't come out or why people don't change their life in whatever way, because they're afraid of the consequences. I always think it's important to be honest about the fact that there often are consequences,
Consequences, yeah.
but the consequence to you staying in a marriage that would have definitely deteriorated, you would have deteriorated as a human being because you weren't being true to, like, there are massive consequences to that as well.
What I think is I don't kn I was really lonely in that marriage.
Yeah.
He was a workaholic too. I was so lonely and, I really raised the kids by myself. He would as long as I told him what to do, he would be there. Like, he would pick up the kids, and he was I mean, he really is a good guy, he would do it. I was in charge, though. He went to work and he made the money, but I was in charge of like a lot of women, I was in charge of
Yes.
home life. I was
Yeah.
no,
My wife was the same, I would
and I
tell
was
you that.
also a stay-at-home mom for 10 years.
Yeah.
My kids
Yeah.
were little, and then that's when I began my professional life when I was 40. But, I stayed home with our kids when I was little. So, yeah.
So let's as we draw to a conclusion, let's talk a little bit about the work you do in the hope that someone has latched onto this and go, oh wow, that I'm resonating with this. What is the type of work you do with women to guide them along this process?
Well, I'm switching the needle to all people. So I do have
Okay.
men we reach out to me, and I haven't worked with them in the past, but I am now doing that as well.
And is it the same?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
this is the thing.
Feelings are very similar.
The feelings are very similar. It's how I work with people. I started a course. Okay, so I want to change on how people come out.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter when you come out. If you come out as a teenager, if you come out with 85, at 85. My oldest client right now, by the way, is 85 years old.
Wow.
And she said to me, I need to figure this out before I die. This is my last chance.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, let's do it. Um, and so what people go through is the four pillars that started is looking at their conditioning, how they were conditioned as a child, who conditioned them. Was it church? Was it family? Was it community? The second thing people have to look at is the cognitive dissonance The third thing people have to look at is their internalized homophobia, because even as I said, even if we're great allies, the only person that can't be gay is me. And then the last thing people have to look at is compulsory heterosexuality. In queer world, it's referred to as comphet, but as I said before, it is how, everybody is assumed to be straight unless otherwise. Um, One of the things people don't realize that when you're making any change, so this is for the people who are not gay, but really are saying, I need to make a change, is that our brain's job is to keep us safe. That is our comfort zone. So even if you're in a marriage and it's totally dysfunctional, that is your comfort zone and you're used to it. So when we start to step out of our comfort zone, we immediately meet resistance. And the resistance is procrastination, denying the inevitability, finding reasons why I shouldn't make a change, because that's our brain. It's trying to keep us safe. And they're saying, and it's our limbic system, and it's saying, oh, there's a saber-toothed tiger out there. You need to retreat, retreat, retreat. But honestly, the saber-toothed tiger is a paper tiger, and it's only our fear, because fear is something that keeps us in our places. So when you are making an extraordinarily change to your life, you have to push back through that. You have to push through that stage of fear and denial to get to the other side. And then you get into the learning stage, and that's when you start to learn about where you want to go, like learning about the queer community. When my therapist asked me what kind of woman I would want to date, and no one had asked me that before, I said I would like somebody who was familiar with religion and not dismissive of it. They didn't have to be a churchgoer, but they needed to be respectful. I wanted somebody that didn't have kids because I have 4 and that's too many, and I didn't want to blend a family. And I also wanted somebody that had been out for a long time in the community because I knew that I didn't know. I knew what I didn't know. So I wanted to be with somebody that, and also who's given me the history of the community. So I really know the history. And my wife actually messaged me 3 days later. I think that's just magical that happened, and I immediately put her into the friend zone, but she did message me 3 days later. Um, so where I was leading with that, can you help me? I lost my train of thought. We were talking,
I was so engaged in listening. I can't even remember where we started, but
but I'm so sorry. I have ADHD and I lose my train of thought a lot, so I
what,
apologize.
what I was taking away from the conversation is the fear underlines
Change. Let me go.
all of it. Yeah.
We go through the fear stage and then the learning stage. So my learning stage is and then we go to the growth stage. And the growth stage is where we begin to do things like start a company called Anne-Marie Zanzal Coaching and start working with people who are coming out later in life, right? Now, just like grief, you go in and out of those stages. So a year after I came out, I said to my girlfriend then, and I said, well, if I'm gay, and she goes, if you're gay, you've been in a relationship with me for a year now. I don't think you're straight. And, it's of course the brain work. So it really just takes a while. You have to have courage when you make change. Courage, my definition of courage is being afraid and doing it anyway. And what that experience gave me is I'm not afraid of anything anymore. Because I know that when I get scared, like building this business and making all the mistakes I've made, and like now I'm going on to the next level, I know it's just fear. And if I just push it, because my brain is trying to keep me safe, stay small, Emery, stay small. Don't try to go bigger than this. But I'm like, no, I know that if I just push through this time, I will go back into the learning stage and the growth stage. So with my business right now, I have been like, how that entrepreneur chart where there's like 9 stages. I am at the systems, like trying to figure out how I'm going to do this, how to reach more people, all that stuff like that. Because what I do, how I help people come out works. And I know that.
And it's been wonderful meeting you. It's been a wonderful story, and I think wonderful lessons for everyone. Sitting here as a business owner, I have no doubt this will be a very successful business for you.
I hope
Uh,
so.
yeah. No doubt for a few reasons. One is that you're teaching from lived experience, which is the most unique and most precious. And any of us, when I have a business challenge, I want to speak to someone who's, 5 years they've walked the road, they're just a 500 yards further down, they've lived. That's the most wonderful. That I think that's the most wonderful thing. You have that lived experience, and so clear it's so clear the gift you bring to the world,
Oh, thank
and,
you. That's
so
like,
clear. So, Anne-Marie, it's been an absolute pleasure
oh my gosh,
chatting.
yes, I loved it.
It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.